Hello, my name is Simon. I'm a producer, mixing engineer, guitarist, whatever you want to call me. Right now, I am mixing an album for a certain rock band, and I created a mixing template to mix this album. And I just wanted to show you how it works, because I think I'm doing some things in this template that not many people think of to do, just to make things more efficient for me and to make things work faster. So let's take a look. And now we are here in the mixing template. You can see right away that things look quite weird. I have set up my toolbar on the upper section of the screen here to be a bit different than what other people are used to. These are just some easy buttons here that are run by scripts. If I choose this track here, I can choose to duplicate it 10 times, like so. Pretty self-explanatory. I also have a button to rename the track to the first item. So if I were to have a audio in the track like this, I can click this button and the track automatically changes the name to whatever is in the track. So this is really cool when I'm dragging in multi-tracks with 100 different stems, you know, instead of going in and manually changing the name of each track, which is really annoying. I can just do it like that automatically. I have another button here which goes directly into RX11, which is my audio editor for getting rid of noise and stuff like that, breaths, whatever. I also have a direct button to put in whatever audio I've got selected into Melodyne, which I use a lot as well. I also have two buttons here for a tone generator, which I use quite a lot for troubleshooting. And then I also have a noise generator here that I can put on a track right away. Here I've also got a volume trim. And this is just a gain thing. I don't remember where I got this from. I think it's customized the script of some random JS plugin to just give me a proper trim here. And this is what I use for volume automation. I prefer to do all my volume automation on on a plugin like this, so I can turn it off and on and stuff. I don't like having the automation on the actual faders. I also have some other buttons here, just, standard buttons just to glue items together. Normally I just use keyboard commands for that, obviously, but I like having them as buttons in case I just I forget. Then I also have a button to delete silence, dynamically split items, freeze items, normalize items. This is all very standard. One thing that I use a lot, which is part of SWS. If you got SWS on Reaper, I've got this here, which is analyze item. So this is pretty cool. So right now I've got a song here. I'm not going to play the song because it is copyrighted. If we just wait for this a while, we can see here we got the LUFS and the true peak and whatever. So I use this a lot when I'm preparing stems to mix. Is I click here, I right click, and then I go to true peak. Is a button here in the menu. So then it takes me automatically to the section with the highest true peak, and then I have a good reference to add, a limiter or a compressor or whatever I want to do to prepare the stems for mixing. So that's just the basic thing that I do when I prepare things to mix. But what do I have here in the mixer window? Well, I have all my buses set up for all of the different types of instruments that I might need to mix. So I got drums, percussion, bass, guitar, keys. This EL, else, this is just for everything else, basically. That's why it's called else. I got the lead vocals, background vocals, and special effects. And then here I got another section with all of my VCAs, which is the way that I prefer to mix. I like to have just a fader for each thing, and these VCAs are also connected not to the groups but to the individual tracks inside of the groups. So this is quite nice because if I have any effects on the actual buses, I can use the VCAs to pump more volume into those bus effects. And then here I got 3 different groups. This group here is for all my parallel buses. I got a lot of them. I will go into the parallel buses later because this is the main way that I mix my music, and that's a larger section that I'll take into consideration later. Here I've got all of my spatial effects. So, room, chamber, plate, spring, reverb, tape echo, whatever. All of these are just stock Reaper stuff. So if I take up my room, for example, you can see I've got a lot of stuff on here. I've got some volume adjustments where I'm doing stuff. I got a de-esser that is before the reverb, an EQ that also comes before the reverb. Then I got 2 different reverbs. This is my room reverb, and for my rooms I prefer to have 2 reverbs that are independent of each other on different channels. And then I've also got the Reaper's standard algorithmic reverb here. That's on the left and right channel. If you wonder how I did this, you can go into here in the plugin. Here you got a plugin pin connector, and then I just make sure that this plugin is going to channel 1, and then this right channel plugin is going to channel 2. And by doing this, I can get independent reverbs on each channel. Then here I also got a post EQ, and then also I'm adding a slight stereo width gray here. And that's basically how all of these are set up. I've also got some parameters here right on the channel strips, so I don't have to go into the plugins and screw around. That's actually the whole point of this mixing template, is that I want everything to be accessible. I want to mix everything without having to open any plugins, just like you would on like an analog mixing console. All of the buttons that I need are right here on the channel strips. Then this last group here is for all of my reference tracks. In here is where I would put, like, you know, if the client I'm working with has some reference track that they have, I can put that in here. If I have my own reference tracks, usually if I'm working on a draft of a mix and I have some previous drafts, I can put those in here so I can listen right away to whatever previous draft I had, just to make sure that any changes that I make are actually beneficial to the final product and stuff. All right, now into the parallel stuff. This is the thing that really revolutionized the way that I mix, because by default I've got these parallel buses. These are color coded according to the group that they're connected to. So you can see red is my color for drums, and that is connected here. So if you see here in the sends that I got here on these individual tracks, these are all going to my drum crush, drum comp, drum dirt, and drum clean. These are all connected to just all of the tracks. And that's how I prefer to do it. I don't really like to add like compression or whatever to the individual tracks. You know, you could do that. You could add like a compressor like this on the actual mix bus for the drums. You could do that. I prefer not to do that. And why, you may ask? Well, that's because of weird stuff like intermodulation, distortion and stuff like that. I prefer to have all of my individual elements as clean as possible, and then I can mix in some distorted or compressed elements using my parallel buses. And I found that I get much more, the transients are retained as I process stuff by doing everything in parallel buses. These 2 buses are the 2 that really revolutionized the way that I work, because I got a dirt AC, which is just short for dirty accent, and then I got a clean accent as well. And what are these doing? Well, if we go into the dirty accent here, this is just a Scheps Omni channel, which is my favorite plugin in the whole world. I'm using these 2 filters that are built into this plugin. I got the low pass filter and the high pass filter, and I got these set up using the parameter modulations that are built into Reaper, so that I can control both of these at once, effectively creating a band pass filter. And I'm using this band pass filter in parallel. I will give you an example right now, actually. So I have some drums here. It sounds just like that. And then we will go in here. These are automatically connected to these parallel buses as soon as I drag them into the project. And when I drag up this dirt accent, you will see what happens here. So this is what the dirt accent is doing, and I've got some parameters from Scheps Omni channel right here on the channel strip. Again, that's because I don't like to mess around with plugins when I'm mixing. I just want everything in front of me all at once. The reason for why I have this in the first place is because the snare drum and the kick drum are like the most essential parts of the drum kit, in my opinion. But one thing that I feel is that there's a kind of void in the frequencies between the kick and the snare drum. And this dirty accent bus that I have is to create more frequencies in between the kick and the snare drum to make them sound more glued together. I think that amount is good. Let's see how this sounds if I bypass it. So there you can hear that there's some extra fatness in the kick in the kick and the snare drum, which is very nice. So let's look at the clean accent one now. And what makes this clean? Well, instead of using the Scheps Omni channel, I'm using the Isotope linear phase EQ. And linear phase basically means that it doesn't introduce any phase, which is great when you're doing parallel stuff. I like having the Scheps Omni channel as a parallel one because it does introduce phase, and that can be a quite nice thing to play around with. I don't believe that you should be scared of phase cancellation and stuff. Often that's actually something that you can use to your advantage. But in those cases where I want no phase cancellation, I'll use the clean accent. And this is usually something that I use for the kick drum. When it comes to phase cancellation, it's usually like the bass frequencies that are the most troublesome. So using a linear phase EQ in this application made more sense. The way that this parallel send is set up is that I got the EQ, which is just adding a bunch of, I don't really know how much that is, 8 dB or something, around 40 hertz. And this bass boost is something that I can increase on the channel strip because I don't like to have any plugins in front of me when I'm mixing. That main reason is because I like to listen with my ears, and I don't want this graph to sort of fool me into thinking that I'm doing something that I'm not doing. And depending on what I want, I could use this to add more high end on the cymbals, or I could add more, you know, more clong to the snare drum, or more. So let's see how this sounds now. So you can hear that it sounds really smooth and nice, right? And I'm not looking at any of the plugins while I'm actually mixing something. I'm just playing around with this frequency and resonance knobs here until I get something that I like. You probably have to get some headphones for this, or a good subwoofer or something. But there's a really deep sub bass that I'm adding to the kick drum that I don't think really was there before. I'm sort of artificially adding extra expansion to that bass end. Anyway, and then I've also got a compressor and a crush, which is just another compressor but with distortion. But basically, these are all of the things that I'm really doing. I've just duplicated these buses basically. I've sort of changed around how they work depending on what instrument group they're controlling, just to make things more, I don't know, controlled, I guess. Now you may be asking, like, why so many parallel buses? Well, that's because I like to listen with my ears, and I really enjoy how fast I can get a raw multitrack to sound kind of like a mix within like 20 minutes. And I don't have to mess around with any plugins. I just drag everything into the project, and then I just drag faders up and down on my parallel buses until everything sounds good. And with these parallel buses, I can get kind of 50% there. The next 50% will be all automation and sort of individual stuff going on. I have been using Sooth for sidechaining instead of a compressor. This is a trick that I learned from, I think it was Jason Joshua, who does this a lot. It sounds super transparent. Not really that great if you're doing like house or techno music or whatever, where you want that really aggressive sidechain. But when you're just doing like rock and pop music or whatever else, where you just want the kick and the bass to sort of be friendly with each other, using a Sooth is great. I guess one last aspect of my workflow that would be interesting for you to see is that I'm using a Scheps Omni channel on every track, every individual track anyway. This is the main plugin I'm using. With this, I can get like 70% of the way there without any other plugins. Of course, there are some specialty plugins, like if I need to use, like, I don't know, a chorus or a flanger or auto-tune, I don't know, whatever. But for all the main mixing stuff, you know, you got saturation, all of the filters you could ever need, a noise gate with an expander, 2 de-essers that are full range, an EQ, 4 different compressor stages, and all of these can also be run in mid-side. I really love this. Anyway, this was my short run through of my Reaper project. I hope you found this useful or inspirational or whatever. Maybe you got some fresh ideas, some things you might want to try out in your own projects. Maybe you thought that everything I've done here is completely insane and useless. That's fair enough too. If you like this, give it a like. I don't care. Subscribe if you want to. Goodbye.